Hey guys, I want to show you clips from interviews I've done with Jack Endino and Steve Fisk, where they discuss what it was like producing SOUNDGARDEN. I'm also going to read a quote from Michael Beinhorn, the man who produced Super Unknown, and a few quotes from Chris Cornell regarding the making of Black Hole Sun. I did a full video on the making of Black Hole Sun. If you want to see that video, it's linked below.
How did you end up working with SOUNDGARDEN?
Well, when Skinyard started, it was a very small, incestuous little music scene here in Seattle. There were only a couple of clubs where you could play if you were, not a cover band. And, most of us were of a similar generation and we knew each other. Kim Thiel actually lived very close to me. He was kind of a neighbor. He lived a few blocks from where I was living in 1985. So we hung out a little bit. Daniel knew the other guys. Matt Cameron, who was our drummer, ended up joining SOUNDGARDEN a couple of years later. We're all tight. And SOUNDGARDEN had started around the same time. I believe their first show was November of 1984. I could be wrong, but I think that's the case. And they were a three-piece at the time. The drummer was Chris Cornell. And some of our very early shows in summer of 1985 were playing with SOUNDGARDEN, actually. So I think we played with them in 85, 86, 87, quite a few times before they got signed to a major label. So when I started working in a recording studio in 1986, and SOUNDGARDEN was looking to start doing some real recording, I'd done some 4-track demos for them before that on my little setup. It was logical for them to come in and record with me because they already knew me. They'd already worked with me in my basement. So some of the very first clients that we had at Reciprocal Recording in summer of 1986 were SOUNDGARDEN.
What was your relationship with SOUNDGARDEN like?
Produced them once. Mm-hmm. And that's for the stuff that got tacked onto the back of the Screaming Life EP, which was the FOP EP. So I recorded the FOP EP, which had the FOP remix, and then there's the FOP remix, the Big Dumb Sex remix, the Spoon Man remix. I did a rejected remix for Switch Open that no one's ever heard. There are two remixes of Spoon Man, one that got rejected and the one that got released, which was the B-side of Black Hole Sun, which is actually pretty cool. And then the work I did with the Telephantasm. So a lot of remix work. And specifically, they wanted me to do my kind of remixing, which is using a lot of media sources and just deconstructing the band, in kind of a brutal way. Things reconfigured and basses over, verses over choruses and choruses over verses and things like that. So the SOUNDGARDEN remixes weren't really remixes the way Madonna had remixes. They were, they weren't, you weren't supposed to dance to them. Yeah. I think that was the idea. That's why the labels paid for it. Oh yeah, it's summertime. Let's get a SOUNDGARDEN remix. And then they get Big Dumb Sex, which I think he says fuck like 45 times.
Do you think Kim and the band would be able to eventually kind of get back in the studio and make a new album, or is that something that's not going to be possible?
Well, if you're inviting me to speculate, I haven't spent any time thinking about that. I will say I'm very happy that Kim is playing again and that he's taking this opportunity to work in different musical situations. And if Kim stopped playing, a lot of people will be really bummed out. That's inside that thing he does. That's a big part of what you're talking about. But yeah, if there's never another SOUNDGARDEN, that's a drag,
So how did your relationship with SOUNDGARDEN begin? Was it similar to how your relationship with Nirvana began?
Almost exactly the same. Well, actually, not quite the same way. I was living in Ellensburg, and I got invited to make an EP for them. But it was the same thing where they had a very wonderful record they did with Jack, and now I was getting to do the second record, which is a little like having a gun pointed at you, because Jack's so good and people make great records with Jack. But I think it was 1989 and I was still living in Eastern Washington. So without ever meeting Soundgarden, we had you understand that record was recorded in the Moore Theater, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a friend of mine was also a very good engineer and producer, Drew Canulet, took his truck up and got it. Actually, I think he negotiated the space. I think he knew the guys at the Moore. And so we set up in the alley, and the 2 days, I think we had 2 days of recording in the Moore Theater, and that's how that's where I got to know Soundgarden. And I'm still good friends with Kim. We talk a lot. Yeah, no, Kim turned into a lifelong friend. He's a pretty amazing person. And they were a different band with Hero. All respects to the other great bass players that were in the band, but that was that was a Hero record. He definitely had this kind of like Chad. He brought kind of a looseness to it and a swing to it that kind of disappeared with other players and all that.
Michael Beinhorn produced Black Hole Sun. He recalled the following about recording the vocals of the song with Chris Cornell. After the first time Chris sang it, he turned to me after a full day's worth of work, after listening to it, and went, "It's not good enough." I mean, it's tough to say that to an artist, but when an artist says that to you about his own work, you're like, "I love this guy. This is fantastic." I was like, "Okay, man, I'm with you 100%. Do what you've got to do." So he came back 1 week later, went back in, and we did the vocal that you hear. In terms of the vocals on Black Hole Sun, Chris Cornell recalls the following. "When I sing it, there are elements of the Beatles in it and Led Zeppelin that I get from it, and also a little bit of the Syd Barrett era of Pink Floyd. I think the Beatles is one band that if I'm working on a song arrangement or if I have some idea for a song and there's a little bit of a Beatles quality to it, I never avoid that. I always will steer into it." Considering how often the lyrics to major hit songs are analyzed, I think it's really interesting to hear directly from Chris Cornell that there was no real idea to get across with Black Hole Sun. With that said, however, there is one specific line in the song that does seem to suggest there is a message here. That line comes from the second verse of the song when Chris Cornell sings, "Times are gone for honest men." In an interview with Rolling Stone from 1995, Chris Cornell spoke about this line. "It's really difficult for a person to create their own life and their own freedom. It's going to become more and more difficult, and it's going to create more and more disillusioned people who become dishonest and angry. There's so much stepping on the backs of other people in our profession. We've been so lucky that we've never had to do that. Part of it was because of our own tenacity, and part of it was because we were lucky." So how exactly did the song come together? I'm going to be discussing that and more in this video. Hey, my name's Daniel. If you're new to my channel and you like rock music, make sure to subscribe. Everything I do here is 100% DIY, and your subscription does go a long way to help support this channel. Soundgarden was formed as a band in 1984, and although they had success over the course of their first 10 years, it really wasn't until 1994 and Super Unknown, specifically with Black Hole Sun, that the band really took off commercially. 10 years in the life of a band is a long time, and over the course of those 10 years, Soundgarden went through a lot of ups and downs, yet they kept their integrity and were able to succeed. Now, when it comes to Black Hole Sun specifically, not only is it Soundgarden's biggest song, it's also their most recognizable music video. I'll be expanding on that a little later. As to how Chris Cornell came up with the song, the idea came to him during a drive home from a recording studio. I wrote it in my head driving home from Bear Creek Studio in Woodinville, a 35-40 minute drive from Seattle. It sparked from something a news anchor said on TV and I heard wrong. I heard blah blah blah, Black Hole Sun, blah blah blah. I thought that would make an amazing song title. But what would it sound like? It all came together, pretty much the whole arrangement, including the guitar solo that's played beneath the riff. I spent a lot of time spinning those melodies in my head so I wouldn't forget them. I got home and whistled it into a dictaphone. The next day, I brought it into the real world, assigning a couple of key changes in the verse to make the melodies more interesting. Then I wrote the lyrics, and that was similar, a stream of consciousness based on the feeling I got from the chorus and the title.